This video is a budget cooking video. I'm going to show you how I made 3 delicious dinners for my family here in our family kitchen with about 20 bucks. If you watch my channel, you know that I am no stranger to budget cooking. I do a lot of that here. In fact, I have a playlist in the description box of all of my budget meal videos. So if this one doesn't float the boat, if it isn't what you're looking for, be sure to go and check out that playlist and see if there is something that suits your needs. For this video, I decided to go with a slightly less extreme budget of around $20 and see what I can make up for my family across 3 nights. So these are actually 3 nights worth of dinners for about $20. Plus I threw in a dessert as well for a couple bucks extra. Let me show you my grocery haul, what I'm using to make these meals, and then we'll dive into the recipes. I picked these items up at Walmart, but you could probably purchase these items at just about any grocery store or comparable items. I have a 5-pound bag of russet potatoes, a 2-pound bag of frozen meatballs. I opted for the turkey meatballs, but you could get the regular ones. One of the 12-ounce bags of frozen veggies. I just opted for the green beans here. A big can of crushed tomatoes. A quart or 2 pints of half and half. This is a little more than half a pound of fresh broccoli. This is probably about 2/3 of a pound. 1 bag of baby carrots. 1 8-ounce block of extra sharp cheddar cheese, and then 1 package of provolone slices. 2 different kinds of bread from the discount bakery rack. I have these rolls, which I'm gonna use to make some delicious meatball sandwiches. And then I have just a loaf of like French bread here. That was the only one on the discount rack. And then I splurged and added a couple dollars to my budget to go ahead and make a dessert. We're gonna make a little banana cream mousse. So I have an instant pudding here. This is banana cream. You could use chocolate or vanilla or a different kind if you want. And then 1 container of whipped topping. So I had kind of kept track as I was shopping, and I had an idea of what my total was going to be when I went to the register. I thought that it was going to be right around $22 because I was a couple dollars over for having bought a few ingredients for a dessert recipe. But when I checked out, I was really surprised to find that my total before tax was actually around $24. So I scanned back through my receipt and I realized that I made a mistake. I fell victim to one of the classic blunders.
That's what's so funny!
You will have noticed that I purchased turkey meatballs in the frozen food section. Those were the meatballs that I picked up in the 2-pound package. And for years, whenever I buy frozen meatballs, those are the ones that I typically will buy. And they have, in the past, been the same or a very similar price to the Italian style meatballs and the home style meatballs that are usually made with beef and or pork. But whenever I picked them up in Walmart for this video, they were actually $2 more for the same size bag than the other kinds of meatballs that were there in the freezer. So all that's to say, if you wanted to come in right around the $20 budget, you don't have to do the dessert that I'm going to make. And if you want to buy just the regular meatballs or the Italian style meatballs, they will still work in these recipes and they won't be quite as expensive as the turkey meatballs, where for some reason I missed that. I just assumed that they were gonna be the same price because there wasn't a tag right there under that size bag. So when I saw the higher price, it was next to the bigger bags. And I thought that that was for the bigger bags of meatballs, not the standard size, but oh well, I will make it work. And like I said, if you wanna come in at that $20 price point, just leave out the pudding and the Cool Whip and buy the less expensive meatballs in the freezer section, and don't make the mistake I do of assuming that the turkey ones are the same price. Tonight, we're gonna have some meatball sandwiches, and I'm going to make some homemade steak fries or oven fries or air fryer fries. I'm probably gonna make mine in the air fryer, but you can make these in the oven, so I'll show you how I'm doing that. But right now, I'm gonna get the meatballs going in the crock pot, and I am going to make my own spaghetti sauce mix. I have a recipe that I keep on the door, the cabinet door of my spice cabinet, for like what you would normally find in one of those spaghetti sauce packets. If you wanted to skip that step and you wanna pick up just a can of that prepared Hunt's pasta sauce or a can of prepared spaghetti sauce, you could use that instead and you wouldn't have to season it. But I just decided that I would take the long road today and make that seasoning mix because I think it's really good and flavorful. And then I can just use my regular crushed tomatoes along with my meatballs in the crock pot. So let me show you how I'm doing that. My own personal measurements for making homemade spaghetti sauce mix like you would normally buy in a packet at the store are 1 tablespoon each of garlic powder, oregano, parsley, dried parsley, and minced dried onion. This is not onion powder, it is minced dried onion. 2 teaspoons of basil, 1 of thyme, and then about half a teaspoon of salt. You can leave that out if you want to leave it out. And I always put in a pinch, like maybe 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper. And I also throw in a tablespoon of cornstarch. You know how those packet seasonings often have like a thickening effect, like they will thicken up a sauce or whatever it is you're using it for? It's usually just cornstarch. So I put a little bit of that in it as well. And I will use about 2, maybe 3 tablespoons of this mixture to make just a standard family size batch of spaghetti. So I'll probably be using about 3 tablespoons today with the, actually I'll probably just use 2 tablespoons today with the meatballs, because the meatballs themselves are seasoned, so it's not going to take a whole lot of seasoning. I'm just trying to season the crushed tomatoes that I'm putting in the crock pot with them. I have half of my frozen turkey meatballs in there. I just need half the bag, and I put in my can of crushed tomatoes and then 2 tablespoons of my homemade seasoning. I'm just going to stir that all together. I'm going to pop the lid on and let it cook on low until we are ready to make the sandwiches up later. For years, I really struggled with how to make home style fries, like from russet potatoes or hash browns, how to make them like crispy, like the ones that you would buy in the freezer section at the grocery store. I could never figure that out, but recently I learned that brining the potatoes ahead of time is really helpful. So I've chopped up my potatoes into like long thin strips, and I have put them into some cold salt water. I'm just using about a teaspoon or so of table salt. If you're using kosher salt, you can use a little bit more. And I have, you know, about like 4 cups of water or so that they're sitting in, and I'm putting those in the fridge for a couple of hours before I season them and throw them into the air fryer or onto a foil lined sheet and bake them in the oven. I feel like that helps make them like really crispy. Here are my potatoes, and I am just going to drizzle a little olive oil on those and then sprinkle some anti-no-no seasoning. I'm going to use the everything seasoning, and I'm going to use a little bit of this firecracker seasoning too. I'm going to pop those into the air fryer, and I usually cook mine at a lower temperature, like 375, for about 8 to 10 minutes, give it a shake, and then I bump the temperature up to 400 for the last few minutes, like 3 to 5 minutes, so that they will get kind of crispy on the outside. To finish up the sandwiches, I'm just gonna slice my rolls, and I'm gonna put a piece of cheese on them and then put them under the broiler in the oven for a minute or so to kind of melt the cheese a little bit. I'm also gonna try to slice those rolls kind of like a bowl shape so that the meatballs will sit nice in the rolls. Of course, like sub rolls would have worked better, but these were the ones that they had on the discount bakery rack that I felt like using. Okay, here it is. Have my sandwich here, melty cheese going on top, and I have some baby carrots and then my french fries there. Might get out some ranch or some ketchup or something like that to go along with it. Yum. My kids are actually big fans of broccoli cheddar soup, believe it or not. They really like the broccoli cheddar soup from Panera. In fact, that's usually what they get, is the broccoli cheddar in a bread bowl. So I'm going to make sort of a similar version, like a Panera copycat version of broccoli cheddar soup. I'm gonna do that on the stove, and we're gonna have that with some garlic toast, and we're gonna go ahead and make up some dessert for tonight as well. So I'm gonna get that going first, and let me show you what we're making and how I'm making it. I'm going to make a really easy mousse recipe. I'm gonna use my box of instant banana cream pudding. You can use a different kind of pudding if you want. 1 cup of half and half, and then my 8-ounce container of whipped topping. I'm going to pour the pudding mix into a bowl and add the half and half and use my hand mixer to beat that for a couple of minutes. That is only half as much liquid as is normally called for in the pudding. And then after that has started to thicken a little bit, I'm going to fold in the whipped topping. I'm going to put a lid on that and put it in the refrigerator until we're ready to serve it later. Broccoli cheddar soup. Here's what I have. I have my broccoli florets and what's left of my bag of carrots. I'll chop all of that up along with this half an onion I had in my crisper and a little bit of minced garlic. I have 3 tablespoons of butter here. You could use oil if you want, and a 1/4 cup of flour, salt and pepper to taste, 2 cups of water. You could use broth if you want, or if you want to add a little bouillon or some broth base, you could use that as well. And then I'll be adding 2 cups of half and half and my block of sharp cheddar cheese, which I will shred up at the end. My onions have been sauteing in the butter on their own for about 3 minutes, and now I'm going to add just about 2 teaspoons or so of minced garlic, maybe the equivalent of 3 to 4 cloves. We like garlic, so I go pretty heavy on it. I'm going to let that saute for just another minute or so. I'm adding in my flour. I'm going to whisk that around with the butter and onions and garlic. I want that to cook, so to speak, for about a minute or two until it just looks kind of golden. 2 cups of water or broth. Gonna whisk that for a minute or so before I add my broccoli and carrots. Just want to kind of make sure that the flour and all the onions and garlic are incorporated in here. Salt to taste, pepper to taste. Adding in my carrots and my broccoli, and I don't care that my broccoli is kind of like bigger chunks. It's going to cook down quite a lot as it simmers, so it kind of falls apart on its own and just sort of gets incorporated into the soup as it cooks. I'm gonna stir this all together. I'm going to bring it up to a simmer and cover it, and I'm gonna let it simmer for about 15 minutes before we finish it up. My soup has been simmering for a little over 15 minutes, like maybe closer to 20 minutes. So that broccoli and those carrots are definitely starting to get tender. I'm going to stir in 2 cups of half and half, and also my 8-ounce block of cheese shredded, and I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit, like maybe to medium low, and I'm gonna let all of that simmer together for another probably 4 or 5 minutes until everything is heated through, and then it'll be ready to serve. I cannot wait to dive into this. I'm super hungry, and this, I've already given it a little taste and it turned out fantastic. I have 2 pieces of toast from my loaf of French bread that you saw in my grocery haul to go along with it. And one thing that I failed to mention, I think while I was finishing this up, is that after you add the half and half and the cheese and you're letting it simmer to heat through again for a couple of minutes, you really want to stay close by it and keep stirring it, because after you add the dairy, it's really easy for it to burn. So you just want to make sure that you're keeping it on low and stirring it as it heats through. I have made this before, so I'm not surprised that it turned out really well, and I will leave a link in the description box to a similar recipe. And I've already taste tested the dessert as well, so I can't wait to have some of that after I'm done with this, because it turned out really great. I'm going to crush up a graham cracker to go on top. It's going to be a really delicious, easy, simple meal. Tonight I'm going to use the other half of my bag of meatballs, and I'm going to go for kind of like a Swedish meatball type situation. I'm going to cook the meatballs in like a little gravy, like an easy homemade gravy, and then serve them over mashed potatoes with a side of green beans. I have 1 pound of turkey meatballs. This is half of my bag. This is what I have left after I made the marinara meatballs the other night. I am going to use a tablespoon of Worcestershire and a cup of broth. I'm just going to use a cup of water and about a tablespoon of broth base. And then you can use a packet of onion soup mix if you have that on hand. I actually just made basically the equivalent of that from spices that I had on hand in my spice cabinet. I will leave a link in the description box to a website that gives you kind of a recipe for a homemade Lipton soup mix. But this is just parsley, minced onion, garlic powder, onion powder, some kosher salt and pepper, a little paprika. Really easy. And then I'm also going to use probably about a half to 3/4 of a cup of half and half and a tablespoon of cornstarch. To make this, I will put my meatballs in my pan, and then I'm going to add the seasonings, the seasoning mix, and the Worcestershire and the water and the broth base. I'm going to let that simmer for about 10 minutes or so until the meatballs are heated back through. And then I'm going to make a cornstarch slurry by adding a couple tablespoons of water to my cornstarch and mixing that all up. I will add that to the pot on the stove along with my half and half, about a half to 3/4 of a cup, and I will bring that to a simmer and let it simmer together for a few minutes, and it'll be ready to serve. I'm keeping the mashed potatoes pretty basic tonight because I think that the meatballs and the gravy that they are cooking in will be plenty flavorful. So I just peeled my potatoes, I chopped them in half, I boiled them on the stove. I kept just a little bit of that starchy potato water that they cooked in, and then I drained the rest of the potatoes. I put them back in the pot, added the starchy water, salt and pepper, a little splash of that half and half that I bought, and then just kind of mashed them all up, and voila, we have mashed potatoes. If you have a different kind of recipe that you use, or you want to use butter, or you want to add different seasonings to them, by all means go for it. Or if you just wanted to wash the potatoes and bake them in the oven, maybe wrap them in foil, throw them in the crock pot at the beginning of the day to have baked potatoes, that would probably work just fine as well. Here it is, looks and smells delicious. Normally I would take frozen green beans that I've cooked on the stove or in the microwave, and I would toss them with a little bit of butter and maybe a little bit of breadcrumbs and Parmesan cheese, just like a tablespoon of each, but I'm running short on time tonight, so I just put a little pat of butter on top there and some salt and pepper. And I also have a little bit of bread left from the broccoli cheddar soup, so we can have a piece of toast on the side with this as well. Yay. The only thing is that I wish I had made a little bit more of the gravy. Like I could have just used a little bit more broth and made a little bit more gravy to have to go over the top of the potatoes along with the meatballs. But what I have there will do, and smells really delicious. So I can't imagine it's not going to be delicious, but I will let you know if it does not. Okay, it turned out so good. This is so delicious. I thought that it would taste really good, but it's even better than I imagined. It tastes even better than it smelled while it was cooking on the stove, which was pretty good. I mean, we're talking about meatballs and gravy and mashed potatoes, right? I feel like it doesn't get any more like down home weeknight meal than this meal right here. Yummy. Don't forget to check out that playlist in the description box for more budget meal ideas. And if you want some ideas for how to cut the cost of food as prices are rising, check out this video that I made last week where I shared 20 tips that could potentially cut your grocery bill in half.